Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another League of Legends guide. Today, we're going to cover support Zyra.
Feel the thorns embrace.
For more of our content, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/egamingtv or on Twitter at egaming_TV. I do have an Instagram I'm going to start using more often as well. That is egtv.dan, and all of those links will be in the description. But now let's hop right into Zyra with her pros and cons. Zyra is a support champion that has both high burst damage and great sustain damage. She's one of those support champions that if she goes for a full AP build, she can top the damage charts. She then brings a good amount of CC to a teamfight with her ultimate and her E, and she can carry as a support champion. With her plant, she has really solid lane control, and she's great at all stages of the game. One of her downsides, however, is that she's a very squishy support champion. If a Blitzcrank grabs you or a Leona gets on top of you, you're going to have a really hard time surviving that engagement. This is also because you're very immobile and you don't really have a good way of getting out of those engagements. Now, some high harass support champions can also be annoying for you, something like a Misfortune that we saw at Worlds, because you don't have any sustain in your kit either. All in all though, she is a high damage lane bully and if played correctly, can carry games. For our Masteries, we go 12 Ferocity and 18 Cunning, grabbing Thunderlord's Decree as our Keystone Mastery. Thunderlords is insanely easy to proc on Zyra since our plants do work on proccing it as well, and of course we do go for a high AP build, so it will deal a lot of damage. We pick up other things like magic penetration and increased ability power just to make us an even bigger lane bully. For my runes, I like to go for magic penetration reds, a combination of health and armor yellows, magic penetration blues, and magic penetration quints. You get all this magic penetration just to get through all of the magic resist on your opponents, and your plants will be dealing a stupid amount of damage. Now this is a very unique rune setup, and a lot of you aren't going to have all this magic penetration, so it's perfectly fine to get a bunch of ability power in there as well. It also works great on Zyra. Of course, you could opt for magic resist blues as well. For your first summoner spell, you'll have to take Flash. You're a very squishy support mage with no built-in escape, so it's a must grab. Your first option for your second summoner spell is Exhaust. It's great if you're against a hyper carry in the bot lane, or if the enemy top laner is something like a Yasuo or a Riven. It's really good in the late game at shutting down their damage. Your second option for your second summoner spell is Ignite. This is a great pick against immobile champions you know you can easily set up a kill on. It's then also great if the enemy does have champion to abuse healing like Soraka, Swain, or Dr. Mundo. Well, let's kick off our abilities, starting with our passive, Garden of Thorns. Zyra plants 1 seed, occasionally 2, periodically in her vicinity. You can have a total of 8 at one time, and this accounts for seeds planted by both Garden of Thorns and Rampant Growth. Seeds planted by Garden of Thorns last for 45 seconds and briefly grant sight of the spot Zyra planted them in. So the main part of the passive is when you use Deadly Spines or Grasping Roots over one of these seeds, it blooms into a plant. Both of the plants do the same amount of damage, but they do have small differences. We're going to talk about those on the Q&E page. All you really have to know about this passive is cast your abilities over them, so plants spawn. GG. So let's move on to that Q ability, Deadly Spines. Zyra sprouts thorny vines at the target location after a 0.625 second delay, dealing magic damage to enemies within the area. If Deadly Spines hits a seed, a thorn spitter sprouts from it, attacking enemies with long range attacks. So this is your main ability for harassing. It deals a pretty decent amount of damage, but a thorn spitter also sprouts from it from a seed, which has a pretty damn long range. When an enemy is near a seed, try to hit them with this ability and get that Thorn Spitter to sprout, so you'll deal a lot of damage and have a really easy Thunderlords proc. Now let's move on to your W, Rampant Growth. Passively, Zyra's plants get increased maximum health and she stores a seed periodically up to a maximum of 2 stored at once. When activated, Zyra plants 1 seed at the target location up to a maximum of 8 like we know from both Garden of Thorns and this ability, and if there is more than 8, the oldest one will be destroyed. So your passive can sometimes be random and put seeds where you don't really want them, but this allows you to put them wherever the hell you want. Of course, you're going to want to combo this seed with either your Q or E, so you do spawn a plant under the enemy champion. To give the enemy champion less time to react, I like to cast this after I cast my Q or E. Both of these abilities do have a delay before they get to wherever you want, and if you were to plant a seed beforehand, the enemy champion would see it and would usually start moving, so it's better to plant it after the ability is cast. It's a really solid ability, and it's great to combo with either your Q or E. Let's move on to that E ability, Grasping Roots. Zyra sends a surge of vines in the target direction, dealing magic damage to enemies hit and rooting them for a short duration. If Grasping Roots hits a seed, a Vine Lasher sprouts from it, attacking enemies with short-range attacks that slow its target by 30% for 2 seconds. So this is the ability you max first, because the root duration does go up as we level it, and of course that's a great thing to have on a support champion. It's really strong when you combo a seed from your W with this ability, because first you will root them, but then after they will have a plant near them which slows them by 30% as well. If you need short range plants that slow, you'll want ones from your E ability, but if you want long range ones, then you're going to need ones from your Q ability. Alright, let's finish off your abilities with your ultimate, Stranglethorns. Zyra summons a monstrous thicket at the target location, dealing magic damage to all enemies in an area as it expands. After 2 seconds, the vines snap upwards, knocking up all enemies caught in the thicket for 1 second. For Garden of Thorns, plants within the thicket are enraged and deal 50% bonus damage. So first, if possible, you do want to have plants in the area you're going to use this ability in, so they deal an absolute ton of damage. Generally, if you are team fighting, you're going to want to have your plants up first and land a snare, and then follow up with this, so those plants that you do have existing already deal a lot of damage. Of course, you do have 2 seconds to pull this off, so you could cast this ability first, then land all of that stuff, and then have the thicket go off. It's a very, very solid AoE CC ability for a support champion, and is one of the reasons Zyra is such a strong support pick right now. For your skill order, you first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. Then you focus on maxing your E ability for its increased root duration. Follow this up with your Q ability since it does deal a pretty decent amount of damage, and then finally finish off with your W. You only need one early point in your W to actually combo it with both your E and Q ability. Other than that, it's perfectly fine to leave it for last. Alright, let's look at a couple combos now, and first we have our Harassment combo. So you'll first want to start by using your Deadly Spines under the enemy and instantly drop your Rampant Growth under the enemy before your Deadly Spine sprouts. Then just follow up with some auto attacks. This will summon a Thorn Splitter under the enemy champion and hits them with Deadly Spines, of course. Next, we have our kill combo, and first we start by snaring the enemy with our Grasping Roots, but we want to make sure we drop our Rampant Growth under the enemy before Grasping Roots actually hits. This is, of course, because it will spawn a plant. Then you'll want to use your Deadly Spines under the enemy and drop that Rampant Growth under the enemy yet again before the Deadly Spines sprouts. This will use your second charge of your W ability. At this point, you can use Stranglethorns under the enemy champion if you do need to, but honestly, sometimes that's not even necessary. So let's look at a couple tips for Zyra, and first here, make sure you scout bushes with your Rampant Growth. Your seeds briefly grant vision when dropped, so it's a great way to find out if someone's in a bush. Next, as I have mentioned, plant your seeds after you start casting your Deadly Spines or Grasping Roots. This will give the enemy less time to dodge, because if they see a seed sitting there, usually they're either going to run over it quickly or run away. Third, you don't always have to use your Stranglethorns under the enemy team. Generally you will, but it's also a great way to peel so the enemy won't go onto your backline. Lastly, depending on your team, you may want to use your Grasping Roots more defensively. It's a great way to snare the enemy for easy kills, but it's also great to peel for your carries. Sometimes it's much more effective when used defensively. Now Zyra is a support champion that works with pretty much every AD carry out there, but let's look at 3 of my favorites with the highest win rate. So first up is Jhin, and he works great because they can chain CC together. Both are relatively long-range champions and can really abuse those short-ranged enemies. You want to chain Jhin's Deadly Flourish and Captive Audience with your Grasping Roots and Deadly Spines for quick, easy kills. So second here we have Kog'Maw, and he makes really great use of the snare from your Grasping Roots. As long as you can land it, he can follow up with his Void Ooze and then activate his Bio-Arcane Barrage to deal some devastating damage. Since he is a champion that lacks mobility, you can also peel with Stranglethorns. He's really going to love you for it. Then there is Varus, and they form a very strong poking lane. As long as you're able to land your Grasping Roots, he can follow up with his Hail of Arrows and Piercing Arrow very, very easily. You then also bring some nice AoE CC in teamfights with both his Chain of Corruption and your Stranglethorns. So now let's cover some of those hard matchups, and of course first here is Misfortune. She was the go-to counter pick against Zyra at Worlds. She's able to help deal with the plants, and she is a ranged champion and can do a lot of damage from far away to Zyra with her double up, make it rain, and bullet time. She's of course best paired with Ashe as they can combo their ultimates, but she is always a decent pick against Zyra. Next up here is Sona, and she's a pretty hard matchup since she can poke you when your Grasping Roots is in cooldown with her Q and is also able to sustain against all of your harassment. She's then also going to be very effective in teamfights like you since she does have an AoE CC from her Crescendo. Now last here is Blitz, and he can be either insanely easy or one of the most difficult matchups. Now for a seasoned Zyra player, he's pretty damn easy because you can block his grabs with plants and whatnot, but for a new player, he's pretty damn hard. This is mostly due to the fact that you are a very squish mage support, and if he grabs you and combos it with his Power Fist and Static Field, you're basically just dead. Avoid his grabs and harass him as much as you can so he's too low to grab you in the first place. Of course, you can also block angles from him as well with your plants because they do block his grab. Alright, let's finish this guide with our item build, and we start with a Spell Thief's Edge, Health Potions, and a Warding Totem. For our core build, we have Eye of the Watchers, Liandry's, and Rylai's Crystal Scepter. Eye of the Watchers is of course great because that is your ward/AP item, and then Liandry's is really solid as well because it will deal a burn, and your plants even do this as well. Same kind of goes for the Rylai's. It is a way to give you some nice tanky stats, but your plants will slow targets, pretty damn OP. Now if you do prefer Frost Queens, you can also grab that as well, but you will have to get a Ruby Sightstone, and I really hate having to use one of those items on a mage support because obviously there's no AP in it at all. But moving on, first for our boots, we have Sork Shoes to get through some magic resist, Mobility Boots if we do want to roam around the map and pick people off with our E ability, or Ionians if we do want some CDR. For our item pool, Zhonya's is a great defensive item, the Stasis is pretty strong, and if you are against some assassins, you may want to pick this up at some point. Next we have Void Staff. It's a great way to get through some late game magic resist, and if they are building some MR, you will want to grab this item. Since you are a high AP mage support, Rabadon's is also a really solid item if you want to do mass damage. If you need to apply some grievous wounds or want 20% CDR, you could get a Morellonomicon. It's an item that works great on Zyra as well. Then, in case you are against a very high AP team, Abyssal Scepter is a great way to pick up some magic resist and increase your damage potential. If you find yourself roaming more often and you do want some nice movement speed and increase your assassination potential at the same time, you could get a Luden's Echo. Now you could also get a Locket. It is an item that is going to be removed rather soon, so I kind of included it at the end here, but for now it is a very solid pick, especially if you are against something like a brand support where the shield is very effective. So for our normal full build, we take those Sork Shoes with our core build and then get the Rabadon's Death Cap and Void Staff. With this build, you will deal an absolute ton of damage even though you are technically a support champion. Now if you went for the Frost Queens instead, you take that core, add those Sork Shoes yet again, and then finish it off with a Void Staff. As you can see here, since we do need to have that Ruby Sightstone, we don't get a Rabadon's Death Cap, and that's pretty shitty, which is why I don't usually go for the Frost Queens. I don't like wasting a spot for the Ruby Sightstone. But that covers everything I've got for support Zyra. Hope you guys did enjoy the video, and don't forget to check the video description for our links. Thanks a ton for watching the guide, and I will see you guys in the next champion guide. Peace!